In addition to network radio, we'll stream your program in audio and video all over the world. Call Lola Jean now, 727-510-7622. Call today. Your network 1-hour program can start tomorrow. Broadcast your message in audio and video on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hey everyone, it is Brandy Joy with the Brandy Joy Joyride. Feel free to hop in and have a good time with us every Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. This show is brought to you by One Unit, dedicated to bringing people together, letting your voices be heard, and of course, we're here to entertain you, upbuild you, inspire you, and even hear from you. It's every Thursday. Tune in to 106.1 FM, Brandy Joy Joyride, and we will hear from you and let's have some fun.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
We're pleased to announce that we finally ascertained the definition of artificial intelligence. It's Donald Trump's brain.
You are about to enter the arena of real news and factual commentary on The Voice of Reason, here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Now, here is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
And with me in the Tan Talk studio are my co-hosts, attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey, and our Voice of Reason senior political analyst Gary Gibbons. He's also an attorney. On Tuesday, Virginia handed crooked Donald a black eye when they voted to gerrymander the state, which should give them 10 of the 11 congressional seats in November. This effort by the Republicans to cheat by redistricting in mid-decade will probably backfire. If red districts are watered down too much, independents have only 27% approval of Trump. Let me say that again. Independent voters are only showing a 27% approval of Donald Trump. A new AP poll shows overall voters approving only by 33%, disapproval of 64%. And it's past the point where Trump can blame Biden for all the chaos that he is causing. Well, the very next day, a Virginia court halted the Democratic-drawn congressional map approved by voters. A court in Tazewell County said Tuesday's referendum was invalid, blocking the state from taking any action to enact the new districts. The Republican National Committee sued to block the referendum. Now, the Attorney General in Virginia is a fellow named Jay Jones. He said his office would appeal the ruling. In a post on X, he said this, quote, "As I said last night, Virginia voters have spoken, and an activist judge should not have veto power over the people's vote. We look forward to defending the outcome of last night's election in court." Of course, Kevin, the Republicans started the whole thing in Texas, and it's noteworthy that in the 4 states where the Republicans have re-gerrymandered their districts in the middle of the decade, which are Texas, North Carolina, Ohio, and Missouri, the voters were never allowed to weigh in on that, only in the blue states, California and Virginia. And I think, what was the third one? Illinois, I think, maybe, that did it, or New York. It doesn't matter.
Ohio, maybe?
Well, Ohio is a red.
Let me say this, though. I've never heard so much whining Tuesday night. I was watching, it's like the bully and then bullies are cowards. Let me just be clear. It's like the kid who, steals your lunch money or steals your lunch, and you push back and they start whining, and they're gonna tell their mommy. These people, they had the gall to go on the news Tuesday night and talk about how these Democrats are jeopardizing democracy. What they have done, and what's the law of unintended consequences, they have made us meaner. Democrats, we've all, I think, been a little bit too soft over the years about, because we're very inclusive. I think we have much more concern about those who are underprivileged. But we've gotten tougher. We're all for democracy, but we're not going to let you come to to this with a gun and us with a butter knife. We're not doing it. Yeah. But there's a greater good here. So look, if you're going to play ball, don't whine. And that's exactly what happened. What's going to happen really is there's going to be a net negative, I think, because you may have alluded to, Ed, and because I think Texas, California is strong. I think this Virginia injunction is going to go away. I'm not quite sure all the issues that were raised, but they've turned a 6-5 into a 10-1. And I don't care what they've done for us. I do not care if you think it's fair. You start playing fair, and we'll talk about that. But what we care about is what these policies are doing to the poor and the underprivileged, and these wars that are undeclared and people are dying. I don't know if you saw, by the way, I know we'll talk about the war a little later, but the number of injured, not just the dead that have come out by the Department of Defense, which numbers I challenge anyway as being low, is very, very high. But they're whining about this. They got what they deserved. At least there were referendums in California and Virginia. They were just doing it really. I'm not sure there was even a referendum to the voters in Texas. It was just straight through the puppets of the legislature. So I have no, I have no sympathy. I think in Florida, again, like in Texas, I think you better wish what be careful what you wish for in Florida with what's happening.
That's what I was going to ask you, Gary. Do you think this is going to give DeSantis something to think about? In particular, the poll numbers, because if he waters the districts down too much when he redraws the Florida maps, it could just totally unleash this blue tsunami.
Yeah,
and they could lose a lot of seats.
We'll see. If he, like the president, is in a bubble, and isn't paying attention to what's going on out there, because what's really happening is in the blue states that have pushed back, it has been the voters who have said, we don't agree with any of this, where you're redistricting in the middle of the cycle, in the middle of the 10-year census cycle. Don't do it. But if you're going to do that, we don't think it's fair. And so we're going to temporarily block you by doing that. And that's before the voters have even gotten a chance to weigh in. So with you see the poll numbers, and everybody is upset with what's going on. And the voters haven't even had a chance to vote. Where they've been doing it in the red states is all through the Republican controlled legislatures. And those people are just, we have to do this. We have to try to keep our majority, or else the president's going to be impeached. That is the only thing that he seems to care about now. And he doesn't care about the war, doesn't care about the price of anything. He just cares about being impeached.
So doesn't that establish an even greater incentive for him to want to cheat in the November midterms, even to the point of posting ICE agents at the polling places of the minority neighborhoods, or even seizing the voting machines so that he can count the ballots? I mean, it really has started moving forward with what happened in Fulton County when they went in and seized all those ballots from the 2020 election. Right?
Doing the same thing in Wayne County up in Michigan. Even though Trump won Michigan, he lost Wayne County, which is Detroit, by 250,000 votes. And yet he's saying there was something wrong. No, it's a blue city, and that's just the way it happens.
Ed, you mentioned Florida. I was watching a podcast earlier this morning. Chris Chaliza, who's got a podcast, and he's national, and he's not. He's fairly tries to play middle of the road, but he's the one I think referenced that you mentioned, that AP NORC poll of 33% approval, 23% approval. And I know this is not the time for the poll watcher, but approve the cost of living issue. But the point he made, and getting back to Florida, is, and this is the first time I've heard a national person say this. He said those people running statewide in Florida should be concerned about those abysmal numbers, meaning two of the races we've talked about, the governor's race, which I think our friend David Jolly is now very competitive with, and also one we haven't really talked about, which is critical, is the U.S. Senate race, which I think from what national people are saying as recently as this morning or last night, based upon these abysmal poll numbers, unprecedented. These are numbers. Can you imagine 23% approve of how he's handling the cost of living, which was by far the major issue that people went to the polls for? I mean, that, you don't need to take my word for it. They were polling people as they left, the polls or after they voted in November of 2024. So if I were Ashley Moody, if I were some of these other Republican senators running for re-election or governors, I would be very concerned.
And the other issue that they told voters before the last election was that Kamala Harris was going to get us into a war.
Yeah.
Again, just a bull-faced lie. And there was nothing in her past that would indicate that she was going to be a warmonger. Maybe Hillary. Hillary did. She liked wars.
And of course, the Democrats are always accused of being socialists. And now what's going on with Spirit Airlines?
Yeah.
The government's talking about buying the airline. That's socialism.
But you mentioned the war. We're going to hear an audio a little later that apparently Trump is bored with the war. It's like he's playing a game of Monopoly. He's bored. This is a person who got us in this war that he should never have gotten us into, unprovoked, and now he's bored like a child.
Wouldn't you conclude this because he doesn't know where to go with it now? He doesn't know which way to turn or how to get out of it successfully. I mean, he can always declare that Iran agreed to all of his demands and then say, now we can open up the strait. But what happens if it doesn't open? Then he looks like the bigger idiot than he is. How can he get away from this?
Yeah, he's kicked up a weapon, their use of the Strait of Hormuz, which was never used before.
You're right.
Number one. And number two, they'd give their left arm now to get back to where they were under Obama when there was a valid inspection process in place. They can't even get that now. So there's nothing about this war that's positive in any way. And Ed, you're exactly right. In fact, he's bored with anything and can't focus on anything for more than 10 minutes. Is he doesn't have an exit strategy here it's going to kill these Republicans in November.
This is why I think the whole foundation of it was to distract from the Epstein files, and it's worked. He was bouncing around with the Venezuela deal that really didn't do anything when you think about it, because the same administration's there. If he'd have just gone to Maduro and said, look, we want to rebuild your oil infrastructure, and Maduro, you can get $2 and out of every barrel that comes out, they would have played ball, right? They wanted a strong economy. He had no need to actually prosecute the guy any more than he's going to go into North Korea and drag Kim Jong-un out and say, we're going to have democracy there.
Well, you're right, but Epstein's back in the news now when you've got the president's wife. It reminds me of, remember Nixon saying, I'm not a crook back in the 70s. She comes out of nowhere and says, I'm not involved in, I barely know the guy. And then you've got, I guess more importantly now, the Pam Bondi subpoena, which she ignored, is being pushed. The ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, who's Garcia, has made very clear that they're going to push this thing. So that's all about Epstein. So Epstein's not going away.
It isn't, but he's not going to stop trying to bury it, because when that evidence of his pedophilia, assuming it's in there, and I assume it is because that's why it hasn't been released, comes out, that finishes him politically. And if he goes out of office, he goes into federal prison. So he will do anything to keep that information from coming out. The Associated Press reports this morning with respect to Iran that the conflict has already sent fuel prices skyrocketing far beyond the region, raising the cost of food and a wide array of other products. Brent crude now nosed over $100 a barrel, 35% increase from pre-war levels. But this really got my attention. The European Union Energy Commissioner warned of lasting impact for consumers and businesses, likening it to other major energy crises over the last half century. He said the disruption is costing Europe around 600 million balloons a day.
But keep in mind, Ed, and people haven't
money.
Talked about this oil. There is oil they're charging, it's over $1 more per gallon at the pump. There is oil and gas that's being charged by these, gas company that Trump is in their pocket, that is not at all affected by what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, but yet they're still charging $1 more per gallon. So they're getting this huge windfall based solely upon this war when it has no effect upon their cost. So again, you look around, none of this makes any sense.
And then our defense secretary on Wednesday, Whiskey Pete, has said that Iran's military is largely defeated after weeks of U.S. pummeling, but the regime maintains significant military capability, including thousands of missiles and one-way attack drones, according to a recent statement to lawmakers from the Pentagon's Internal Intelligence Agency. Here's what Lieutenant General James Adams, who is the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, said in a public question and answer document provided last Thursday to the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Intelligence and Special Operations. Geez, that's a mouthful. Who are all these guys? Anyway, here's a quote from him. Iran retains thousands of missiles and one-way attack drones that can threaten U.S. and partner forces throughout the region, despite degradation to its capabilities from both attrition and expenditure, unquote. And in addition, get this, contrary to what Whiskey Pete tells us and the president, more than half of Iran's Air Force and more than half of its specialized Navy vessels also remain intact, according to 3 U.S. officials who are familiar with a separate internal Trump administration intelligence assessment. This isn't intelligence coming from Putin. It's coming from maybe that's why he doesn't believe it. He wants to hear what Putin has to say about it. He doesn't trust our own. This is despite, Hegg says, public declaration that the Iranian Air Force has been wiped out and its Navy is at the bottom of the sea.
Well, let's also fire the Secretary of the Navy as you're gearing up your aircraft carriers. I mean, it's just incredible. You fired the top general a couple of weeks ago. Now he fired the Secretary of the Navy this
John
week.
Fellon, he's leaving.
There's no reason given for that other than, we thank you. Don't let the door, hit you in the ass on the way out. But the timing is not particularly good.
What I heard was that Phelan was being pressured to ramp up the building of new warships quicker because that is a big deal for Trump. I guess he liked playing with them in the bathtub when he was a kid or something. But instead, instead of going through Hegseth to get that approval, he went straight to Trump. He's a huge donor for Trump, and that's why he was in the job. And so he goes directly to Trump to talk about it, and Hegseth got his feathers ruffled by that. So instead he goes, well, I'm going to fire this guy.
He had no experience at all in the military.
No,
he was his
just like Hegseth.
His criteria was, as you mentioned, Gary, he's a huge donor.
Yeah,
and so it's instability. It's a horrible decision making. No rhyme or reason to it, but it's just going to get worse. I want these MAGA folks to tell me at some point, what about what we're suggesting has been wrong? We've been saying week after week, this is just going to get worse. We've been saying week after week, the poll numbers are going to get worse. They are. We keep saying week after week that the elections for the Democrats are going to overperform. They are. So not that we're sitting here with special people, but these MAGA Republicans who need to get reelected, they've got to be just scared to death right now what's going to happen in November.
Well, what's really bad is we've seen for over a year now that he's put just incompetent people that have no training, no experience in the jobs that they've been put in. And now that we're in a crisis, we're in a war, and you're looking at it, you're going, oh my God, we're like with our pants down, with the people that he's put in charge. And it's really embarrassing.
Kevin Hassert says the war is right on schedule to end in 4 to 6 weeks, even though it's now in its 8th week. And how is he going to extricate himself from this?
Trump this week was saying, well, wait a minute. World War I lasted 4 years. And then, he went through all the wars and how long they were lasting. And then he said, and we've only been in this one for 5 months. And he repeated that several times. And everybody went, wait a minute. It hadn't been 5 months. It's only been 2. But
well, by the way, he claimed that
really out to lunch.
He said the Vietnam War was 19 years and that he would have ended that war very quickly, despite the fact he lied about this bogus foot problem then he had a doctor lie about it. So he avoided even having 1 minute in the military. But of course he would have ended the Vietnam War in 15 minutes. Just incredible.
Just like Ukraine, right?
Briefly, Gary, and I don't want to interrupt too much, but when your comment about the instability, think about what's happened in the last 4 months. You've lost your buddy Barbie Noem. The Attorney General's gone. You've lost people. We haven't talked about this, but the Secretary of Labor gone. Now you've got the Secretary of the Navy gone. Does this matter to these MAGA people?
The Army Chief of Staff was a bigger firing, because here we are in the middle of the war with the Army, being positioned for possible invasions, and you get rid of the guy who's really in charge.
And our buddy Kash Patel, he's a dead man walking. He'll be gone probably next. I would, either that or maybe for some of the others. But he's, now he sues the Atlantic for defamation, which is I don't know if you've read that complaint. Yeah, good luck with that as a public official. But it's just, and they asked him about it, and he couldn't really talk about it. He's going to be gone. So they're incompetent to begin with, as you said, Gary, and this is what we're getting. But to say you'd lose 3 or 4 cabinet members in a matter of weeks, and you got a middle of a war, you've got huge economic problems, you've got this, as you mentioned, Ed, I agree with you, this Epstein matter, which won't go away, and it's just everyone's, the rats are fleeing the boat. It's comical if it wasn't just horrible.
Yeah, I really think that Kash Patel's neck is on the chopping block, because we're seeing all kinds of evidence of how he's misusing the facility, the aircraft and the staff of the FBI. And of course, again, like you said, he had never even worked for the FBI. He'd never been an agent. So he just gets dragged out of nowhere because he will be loyal to Trump. He will do what Trump says. Trump wants to run all these agencies. He wants to run the whole government, even though our government isn't structured that way. And
there's one long SNL skit now. The latest was he couldn't get on to his computer, and he believed that was Trump saying you're no longer in this position as FBI director. And then he gets on in press conference, goes, "That's not true. I didn't ever have a problem getting on my computer." I mean, it's nothing more than a walking SNL skit.
Yeah, his press conference, he never denied the questions. When they would be asked about it. He just said, "Well, let's take a poll and see who believes that that's true." I do.
Well, the problem is he does have a serious alcohol problem, which that's one thing. Trump, to his credit, doesn't drink because he had an older brother drink himself to death, as we all know. But he's got a problem. He's an addict, that he's in denial, and our country is now suffering because of that.
Now, I have a question for both of you to consider. When Trump or Whiskey Pete or whoever ordered an airstrike on the Iranian leadership, who were meeting to begin negotiating the same deal that we already had established under Obama, and now we're trying to restructure that after Trump tore it all up. But anyway, we were not in a state of declared war. So doesn't that really constitute murder? I mean, if we just go out and willy-nilly kill somebody, we're murdering them, right? We had not declared war against Iran. We still haven't.
Well, that's exactly right. Just like the bombing these purported drug boats off the coast of Venezuela, it would be war crimes, but there's not even a war. So if it's not a war crime, you're exactly right. It's called murder.
Yeah, and he's now fulfilled his prophecy, Trump, that is, that he could literally murder somebody and get away with it because he's done it, right? I mean,
wasn't on Fifth Avenue then.
True, but give him time. Come on. I mean, it's like, it's the way things are evolving. If you ever do anything that makes you feel really stupid, just remember that Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado presented her 2025 Nobel Peace Prize medal to U.S. President crooked Donald Trump. I mean, is this going to get him a peace prize? Are you kidding?
Well, yeah. All you need to know about how incompetent this administration is. Number one, I think they thought this would be like Venezuela or going into Cuba or somewhere else. But if you look at the records of what happened, they literally did not think that this shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz would be a possibility. That was not something they considered, which is just incredible. I know that Hegseth came out very defensive. Oh, of course we thought about that. You go back and look at it, which we can now do as time has gone by. They never considered that to be a possibility, which is just incompetence.
The Iranians, Trump keeps tweeting and blowing up any negotiations because he says these horrible things, or things that aren't true. And what strikes me is the fact that, he's done that for 10 years in America, and it's had, it's worked. Sadly, it's worked with the spineless Republicans who have just knuckled under to everything that he does. And now the rest of the world and the Iranians in particular are saying, screw you, man. We don't have to put up with this stuff. And so how bad of an indictment is that of our political system and how it's been degraded by the fact that people just won't stand up to this guy and do what they're supposed to do.
Now let's listen to John Ossoff. He's the senator from Georgia as he expounds on the foundation of the inherent corruption embedded in the American political system today.
The Mar-a-Lago mafia has taken American corruption to spectacular new heights. But corruption in America runs a lot deeper than Donald Trump. Because how does American politics really work? It's coin operated. Money goes in, favors come out. It's been running on secret money, corporate money, billionaire money, both sides. Both sides. Citizens United was the worst court decision in modern American history. It's why members of Congress don't listen to the people. They listen to their donors. And this corruption is why insurance companies get away with denying your claim for a procedure you needed to save your life. This corruption is why big tech's still allowed to spy on us and track our every move and sell our private lives to the highest bidder. This corruption is why the ultra-rich get tax cuts while you pay more for everything. And beneath it all, a lazy, cynical expedience in Congress and in both political parties, serving donors and reciting poll-tested talking points with no higher purpose than winning the next election. A politics unmoored from fixed moral principles and incapable of inspiration or great national achievement. And all of this gave rise to a depraved president who exploits this rot to empower and enrich himself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, you're listening to the Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network with me, Ed Golly, my co-hosts, attorney and former circuit judge Kevin Carey, and attorney Gary Gibbons. It's time for a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about the tariff refunds, and we're going to talk a little bit about John Roberts, what he's up to, along with more of the issues the conservatives never want you to hear about.
Are you a writer, inventor? Do you have questions about your intellectual property rights? Well, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 o'clock for Joy on Paper. Once a month, I will have a special guest, the writer's legal eagle, Bill Larson of Larson & Larson, who can answer your questions. Protect your valuable work. Email me your questions to patsy.radio@gmail.com and then listen in every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. right here on Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network. That's patsy.radio@gmail.com.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show here on Tan Talk Radio. Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you. So again, don't miss us on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show. We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. And now it's time for the Only a Conservative Could Think It Minute with your host, Ed Golly.
Christian immigrants came to America to escape the religious oppression of their king. These Christians occupied the land and resources of Native Americans and either enslaved or murdered all who resisted. They engaged in human trafficking of blacks from Africa to populate their plantations with slave labor. They denied that blacks were members of the human species, deserving of any rights whatsoever. White Christians beat, raped, tortured, and murdered black slaves on a whim without any accountability. They raped and bred their black slaves for profit and pleasure with the same disregard they had for any other livestock. Christians enacted Jim Crow laws designed to deny blacks freedom, equality, social equity, due process of law, and justice. They oppressed women and kept them barefoot and pregnant, second-class citizens. Today, Christians conveniently forget about the Christian legacy and pretend that Christianity should set the ethical and moral standards for all of America. Only a conservative would think that Christian crimes and oppression are what made America great, and returning to the values responsible for those crimes will make America great again. Think about that.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
It's the voice of reason, 35 minutes past the hour, and Jimmy Kimmel is unreservedly despised by Crooked Donald. Well, on his Tuesday night monologue on Jimmy Kimmel Live, he weighed in on the status of the Strait, among other issues.
The White House is not a fun place to be right now. The Strait of Hormuz is like a Toys R Us. Nobody has any idea if it's still open or not. The ceasefire was scheduled to end tomorrow night. Last night, the president said it was highly unlikely he would extend the truce. He said if a deal wasn't reached, Iran was going to be bombed like Kash Patel at the Poodle Room in Vegas. And that line in the sand was reinforced by his tween-age press secretary.
President Trump has proven before he does not bluff. When he makes a promise, he follows through on it. And I'm not sure why, after 10 years of covering this president, the American media still cannot understand when President Trump says he's going to do something, he's going to do it.
That's right. Said he was going to end the war in Ukraine in one day. He said he's going to release his tax returns, the new healthcare plan, the wall, Greenland. This is a man whose word is as good as the gold commode he sits on. And then, of course, about 3 hours ago, he went ahead and extended the ceasefire. He wrote, "Statement of President Donald J. Trump. Based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured, not unexpectedly so, and upon the request of Field Marshal Asim Munir and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, we have been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal." Well, you know what? It is Taco Tuesday, so why not? The president has been all over the place on this. He told ABC News J.D. Vance wouldn't be part of the negotiations over there. At the same time as people were saying J.D. Vance would be part of the negotiations, he's obviously either not in the loop or just ignoring the loop. And so I am sure his people absolutely love it when he picks up the phone like he did today to call into Squawk Box on CNBC.
I just looked at a little chart. World War I, 4 years and 3 months. World War II, 6 years. Korean War, 3 years. Vietnam, 19 years. Iraq, 8 years. I'm 5 months. Okay, 5 months.
Yeah, come on, guys. Quagmires take time. You have to let them bake. It's such a crazy thing to say, comparing it to, and not even correct. He's not 5 months into it. He's 2 months in. He doesn't even know how long this war that's been going on too long has been going on. Not only is he bragging about the 10 wars he has allegedly ended, he is now giving himself credit for ending wars from more than 50 years ago.
I would have won Vietnam very quickly. I would have, if I were president.
That's right. The man who actually dodged the draft to stay out of Vietnam, who got a note from a podiatrist that rented office space from his dad to claim he had bone spurs, even though he was on the football, baseball, basketball, and soccer teams at the military academy his parents sent him to. Had a young Donald Trump not sustained that incredibly well-timed boo-boo on his foot, not only would he have fought in the war in Vietnam, he would have risen straight to the top and won it very quickly for the United States. And if he had been captain of the Titanic, Leo DiCaprio would be alive today. That's right. He's flailing.
So my question is, should Americans get behind the president in a time of war? Or does a true patriot complain when he thinks of the war is illegal or criminal?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to, that's one reason why the Constitution was set up to require Congress. The whole idea was that Congress is the only body that can declare war, and because then they are the elected representatives of the people, and theoretically the people would then have a voice in whether this is happening or not. And he never did that. He listened to Bibi, who said, this is going to be easy peasy, man. We're going to go in there just like Venezuela. And, that's what they thought. And now, here we are. So I don't think that you have to support something that wasn't done the way it's supposed to be done under the law.
Well, in fact, I think I agree with Gary. You have an obligation to shout out and say this is wrong and illegal under our democracy. And the problem, again, we have a cowardice Congress, the first branch of government, Article 1, doing nothing. That's the main problem. We've always known Trump as a buffoon, and he named these cabinet members who were clearly either not qualified, and further, like our buddy Whiskey Pete. You knew I was thinking about the P, who was disqualified beyond just not being qualified, had disqualifying conduct. So this is what you get.
And now it's not just the independent voters, but some of the people who had been Trump's strongest supporters are now turning their back on him and saying, oops, we goofed here. Tucker Carlson acknowledges his responsibility for the catastrophe of the Trump administration, and he's followed by Megyn Kelly, who's in complete agreement.
We're implicated in this for sure. Yes. It's not enough to say, well, I changed my mind, or like, oh, this is bad, I'm out. You and me and millions of people like us are the reason this is happening right now. I do think it's like a moment to wrestle with our own consciences. We'll be tormented by it for a long time. I will be. And I want to say I'm sorry for misleading people. It was not intentional. That's all I'll say.
I think there's a lot of frustration with President Trump right now. Obviously, the left hates him, but you've got 80% of independents who are against this war, who I don't think are enjoying his little parlor games.
And that really is what it is. I mean, this isn't a planned war. It's like having an airline schedule, and you show up to get on your flight and they say, well, the plane's on schedule, but we don't actually know when it's going to leave. Just hang around and we'll see when we can put you on.
What did Megyn Kelly say a little later there? That Trump has the attention span of I forget some insect.
A gnat.
A gnat. I think it was the attention span of a gnat.
Yeah,
perhaps.
she's fallen off the MAGA bandwagon, and she thinks his micro attention span has led him to boredom with the war in Iran.
Yeah, I mean, Tucker Carlson, you've heard the term crocodile tears. I have, when he's now apologizing, I think Tucker Carlson sees which way the wind is going. I don't think there's any major change of who that person is.
So let's let Megyn Kelly weigh in.
I mean, he keeps doing this. He ratchets up the rhetoric every time we're at the end of a ceasefire or demanding, that they respond to us in some way. And Trump escalates the rhetoric. And that Wall Street Journal article the other day made really clear why he was doing that, and really kind of exposed how it's a tactic. And he admitted that it was a tactic to aides, who then spoke to the Wall Street Journal. And this also talked about, this article, about how he is trying to seem unstable, and wanted to be as unstable and insulting as possible, believing it could bring the Iranians to the table. That post about a whole civilization will die, he saw it as a way to spur negotiations in a war the president was desperately ready to end. Axios reporting today that Trump is bored of this war and wants it over. Whatever. Maybe it wasn't the best thing to start if you didn't have the patience to actually see it through. That's what his supporters of the war might say. I mean, those of us who have been against it from the beginning would like to see it wrapped up, whether it's out of boredom or not. It's really too bad that the cost of American lives isn't the motivator. It's that Trump has moved on to other things because he has the attention span of a gnat.
Her words, not mine. I just couldn't give her an argument.
Yeah, I didn't mean to steal that thunder, but the word I liked there was whatever.
And it's too little too late for these people. Come on, please. Yes. Yeah. I mean, they are responsible with the lies that they've been telling, and Fox was lying about the 2020 election being stolen. They had to pay $864 billion or something to, in damage. I mean, it's just ridiculous that they're now saying, oh, we didn't know. We thought, he was a wonderful person. The BS. I mean, they all knew that what he was, and they sold it anyway because their audience for their podcasts, they hold their finger up and they listen to feel how the wind's blowing and say, okay, well, it's time to pivot now because we're losing the people that tune in every day.
Now, speaking as we did earlier of congressional approval for actions, one thing Trump did practically from day one was impose tariffs, which the president is not authorized to do. He did it by declaring an economic emergency, which the Supreme Court ultimately concluded we didn't have in place at the time. So he overstepped his authority as usual. And now the court has ordered those tariffs to be refunded. Well, guess who's not getting a single dollar of those tariff monies back? That would be China or any other importer. So where did this $166 billion come from? Well, businesses are getting those tariffs back, but it's really uncertain if that's going to be passed down to the consumers who ponied up the money in the first place. Major retailers like Walmart is getting $10.2 billion back, Target $2.2 billion, Home Depot $540 million. They're among those expected to get significant refunds, and that's just going to go right into their bank account. They're just getting free money from the consumers who are getting screwed by Trump. So think about that when you're paying higher prices. I think even Trump can't figure out a way to spin that into blaming Biden for the whole mess that he created. I mean, we're beyond that now. He's past it. It was over a year since he's been in office, and he can't blame anyone but himself for how screwed up things are now under his dysfunctional administration.
Well, the two levels. One level, as we've already talked about, is this was not a part of the campaign. And in fact, it was just the opposite. He not only did he not address it in any way, suggestion of going to war, he said exactly the opposite, that he would not get us into one of these Mideast wars that goes on forever. Exactly the opposite of what he promised the voters in 2024.
Yeah, they show these montage of clips from all of his rallies, and he brags about we're never going to get into the war. And then he would say, and Kamala Harris will get you into a war. So again, they were just trying to, mislead folks, and he had no intention of doing any of those things. Once he was elected and he didn't go to jail, it was like mission accomplished. I'm fine. Now let the fleecing begin.
Well, as you said, Roy, the primary reason for him running and the result was him avoiding federal prison. But, he was facing already a convicted and continues to be a convicted felon, by the way, which no one else, the MAGA people don't want to bring that up. They think it was all a joke. The 32 count felony conviction was never overturned. But this war is going to continue. I don't know what the MAGA people think is a solution to this when they're not even going to get back to where we were, which is inspections. Now, these MAGA people love to brag, and I've talked to a few of them. Well, no one else had the what's to go into this war. Maybe there's a reason why these other presidents did not go into this war. People, they understood Iran was not Venezuela. It was not Cuba. It was not Canada. It was not Greenland. There's a reason you don't get yourself. Iran, in fact, I think you'd argue is much worse than many other countries in the Mideast. And not only have you destabilized the economy with this oil problem and other issues of getting products out of the Strait of Hormuz, but you've destabilized further the Middle East. You've got, Israel. I think we've given them too much of a pass on this right now. They're going into Lebanon. It's just a what show in the Mideast right now. Nothing about it is improved over the last administration.
And you've taken what the intelligence community and the Pentagon always thought was the situation. That maybe Iran could close the Strait of Hormuz. Iran didn't really believe that they had that power until this. And now it's shown them that, oh, wow, we are the king of the castle here. Yeah. We do control this. And you know what? If they resolve the war today, it's still going to take the Pentagon saying more than 6 months to clear the mines that are in the strait. There are thousands of mines there that are going to affect shipping for a long time. And that's going to have, just horrible effects on the prices of everything. Food is really going to start increasing. I saw a story yesterday that food prices are up 8% since the war started.
And Europe is down
8%?
to about 5 to 6 weeks supply of kerosene to fly jets, which you might think, so who cares if their airline shut down? But remember, if American Airlines flies a 757 over to Europe, how are they going to get fuel to bring it back? Meaning transatlantic air travel would come to a stop. It's a complete standstill.
I can't ever not speak about my good buddy James Carville. They talked about it's the economy, stupid. Look at the issues you've got that people are fully aware of. The groceries have gone way up. I mean, people say, well, eggs have gone down. I don't know about that, but gas prices are up over $1. Healthcare costs are going up. In addition to, Medicaid benefits have been cut. Hospitals are closing, nursing homes are closing, and even quite a few of these red states. And the numbers reflect, as I mentioned, we've got a new low of 23% or 27% approving of how this cost of living issue is being resolved. And he really, Trump has no way of getting out of this quagmire. No way. In fact, he's acknowledged already publicly that he doesn't think these gas prices are going to go down anytime soon. And these Republicans running for office, they're praying that something can happen between now and not just November. It's going to have to happen by August or September, because people, get in their minds a perception and they know what they see, which is that the common person, the average person in this country is struggling right now economically.
Yeah, we've only measured consumer confidence for 70 years, apparently. And this is the lowest that consumer confidence has ever been in the time that they've been tracking it. And what surprises me is that the market yet hasn't fallen as much as it's going to, because I don't know. I think there's this false hope that he's going to pull a rabbit out of a hat or something. But I think as every day passes, we're seeing that that's just not the case. And soon the market's going to go, well, wait a minute, we're in for a real rough ride ahead.
And citing the impact of this conflict in Iran, the International Monetary Fund has downgraded its forecast for global growth this year from 3.3% to 3.1%, and said it expected inflation to rise to 4.4%, which is an increase of more than half a percentage point from January. In a severe scenario in which the war lasts for months, global growth could drop to 2%, they warned. What do you think? I mean, how can this get resolved? Do you have any kind of prediction or sense of where this might lead and how can it ever be concluded?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to end with really nothing gained, and as we've said several times today, worse off than they were if they had complied and Trump had not torn up the Obama inspection plan that John Kerry, who was interviewed, I saw the other night, talked about. See, there's a very good book that John Kerry's written about being Secretary of State. It's a very complex job to have. They talk about these negotiations lasting 20 hours. That's nothing. These negotiations need to go on. But in answer to your question, we've got no chits in our back pocket, Ed. And so what the resolution is going to be ending it based upon a situation where we're less stable than when we had the Obama plan for inspection in place, period. And as you just mentioned, Gary, on top of that, you've still got these mines, in the Gulf area there. Plus you have Iran now saying, gosh, I've got a weapon in my back pocket I never even knew I had, which was the threat to keep shutting that strait down.
Yeah, I think any solution is going to come from Europe or the other states in the Middle East. We're going to be viewed as irrelevant, sadly.
And China is going to fill the gap that we're leaving with, starting, I think, with the elimination of U.S. aid. They're moving into Central and South America and Africa with their roads and bridges projects and building terminals. They're going to go ahead and fill that gap that we're leaving open for them.
Let me ask you, since I like the fact we talk about politics and law and whatnot, what are these Republicans going to run on? When they go to campaign, just tell me what they're going to get up on the podium and talk about in any way that's a positive thing. I don't say that as a loaded question or a leading question as lawyers. What are they going to get up there and brag about as to why they should be getting 6 more years or 2 more years in office?
The only thing they can point to as a success is the border and the immigration issue, keeping immigrants out of the country.
But
they're going to satisfy the white nationalists.
The last poll that just came out, this AP NORC poll that we talked about, which is a very respected poll from the AP and the University of Chicago, where this NORC agency is from. They're even underwater on that poll. They're in the 30% range
because
even
of
on
how they're
immigration.
handling it.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So I don't know. You're right. What do they have to run on? That's why they're going to need to take desperate measures to try to retain control of Congress. And now we're hearing more and more frequently that even the Senate is going to be in play in this election. It's that bad for them.
Well, again, what they're saying now is exactly right. That these states that were never in play, including Florida, you're talking about Florida and even Texas being in play, let alone now Ohio's in play, Maine, North Carolina, Alaska. I don't think, it's funny that we mentioned John. We heard from John Ossoff. You don't hear any Republicans from Georgia talking about him losing now. He is going to win. He's going to retain that seat.
And you wanted to talk a little about John Roberts. We've got about 4 minutes left in this segment, so speak fast and carry a big stick.
Well, what came out, I'll try and do that as quickly as I can. But I want to echo some things that Gary had said over the last few months about this shadow court, which is relatively new concept. All these emergency orders, but with the New York Times, there were some transcripts that came up from back in 2016 when they're under the Obama administration. There was through the EPA. It was not by statute, but by regulation regarding. And I know Gary, you know more about this than I do, but about the regulations regarding clean air and whatnot.
Coal-fired power plants is what we're trying to make illegal, essentially, because they have been polluting the air for decades, and everybody realizes that it's dangerous for your health, especially if you have asthma and things like that.
So what happened, and when what I'll suggest too, because of time, is our listeners and our viewers from YouTube just Google this topic. But these transcripts came out of and these memos back and forth. The federal court, it was out of D.C. Upheld it, and then there was a stay granted by a stay sought of the rulings going into effect, and the pending the first district, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. They went to the Supreme Court of U.S. and Roberts, and a very partisan. It was a 5-4 without an opinion. And you can again read these memos. He got very partisan and said, "Wait a minute, why this is pending before the Circuit Court of Appeal?" And I know this sounds a little procedural. We're just going to stop it right now. And in the memo, again, you can go read this on the internet. He talks about he's concerned about how this is going to affect the economics of these coal companies, et cetera. But just the procedure where they came in and said, we're going to stop, this is going to stop, even though they did not even allow the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to address the issue on its merits at that time. And ultimately came back to them, and they did, as predicted, throw it out. So again, we don't have a lot of time, but Gary, I know you.
Yeah, I think we need to carry this one over for the next, because the Supreme Court has become very, very politicized, and they are using the shadow docket, and they're also using something called the major decisions doctrine to undo things that they don't like as conservatives. And Obama's plan to have the EPA really do its job, Roberts thought was a bridge too far. We're going to completely change the way that power companies, deliver power here. We're not going to allow that to happen. Well, that's not his job.
Well, you're right.
These agencies were given the power by Congress to do things. And what the Supreme Court is doing is they're stepping in and saying, oh, if this is too big of a deal, then we're going to exercise our authority to stop it. That's being another legislative branch.
So I think just quickly, Ed, for non-lawyers, one of the importance of this happening back in 2016, and I think the order was entered in early 2017 when the rules were about to go into effect, is it became then this procedure, which really hadn't seen much before, this emergency docket, this shadow docket. And by the way, it's been hypocritical because now they're very deferential toward Trump. It's what happens. The Trump people are coming into court saying we need to uphold this. So it's very hypocritical.
Yeah, when you look back at the decisions that they've made on the shadow docket, they're very political depending upon who the president is.
Well, we are going to leave you for a brief moment to check in with CBS Radio for national and international news. And then when we come back, we're going to tell you about the America Reads the Bible Marathon Bible Reading event and explain why the white nationalist Christians who believe this nation was founded as a Christian nation that should embrace Christian values are as wrong as drought. So stay with us here on the Tan Talk Radio Network, and we'll return with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. President Trump gives U.S. forces the order to shoot and kill boats laying mines in the Middle East. Correspondent Aaron Navarro has our top story.
The president in the Truth Social post said he is directing the U.S. Navy to triple their efforts to shoot any boat putting down naval mines in the Strait of Hormuz. There are reports that Iran has laid about over 20 naval mines in that crucial waterway. There is to be no hesitation.
The president's order comes after the Pentagon announced it had boarded a second tanker carrying oil from Iran, this one in the Indian Ocean. Earlier in the day, Tehran released video of what it said were Revolutionary Guard members taking control of two ships in the Strait of Hormuz yesterday. Oil is trading, by the way, above $100 a barrel again. Israeli and Lebanese negotiators are meeting in Washington today to try to extend a 10-day pause in their fighting. Linda Gradstein reports from Jerusalem.
Lebanese officials said they plan to try to get the ceasefire with Israel extended for 1 month, with the truce right now scheduled to expire on Sunday. The Lebanese president accused Israel of war crimes by attacking southern Lebanon during the truce, including an airstrike that killed a female Lebanese journalist. Israel, meanwhile, accused Hezbollah of launching rocket attacks on Israeli troops.
A major shift in pot policy. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche signed an order this morning reclassifying some cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a less regulated Schedule 3 drug. Loyola Law's Lori Levinson.
Realistically, the impact of that will be to ease the tax burdens on those businesses involved in marijuana sales. It also will make it more likely to have more research regarding the medicinal impact of marijuana.
We could get word of a government bailout to save Spirit Airlines from going under as soon as today. Transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve.
In exchange, the government would get warrants to purchase up to 90% of an airline that hasn't made a profit since 2019 and projects it will lose nearly $200 million this year.
We're expecting confirmation anytime now. Our parent company at CBS News, Paramount Skydance, will merge with Warner Brothers Discovery. CBS's Jolene Kent says shareholders are having their say.
According to the company, we don't expect the vote to take very long. It will happen at around 10 a.m. Eastern time. And the vote is really viewed, in a sense, as a formality. The Warner Brothers Discovery Board already unanimously approved the merger deal.
The Dow is down 172 points. This is CBS News.
It's one of the most successful law and justice programs in television history that continues to uncover the truth. 48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Did you ever think about hosting your very own radio show? Here's how.
Hey, Tampa Bay, did you know you can have a 1-hour program on the Tan Talk Radio Network for less than the cost of one 60-second announcement on many Tampa Bay stations? That's right. We'll put you on the radio for less than the cost of one 60-second announcement on many stations. Check it out today. Use your program to promote yourself, your business, or someone else's business. Call Lola Jean, the broadcast queen, 727-510-7622. That's 510-7622. Call Lola Jean now to check out your Tan Talk Network program. In addition to network radio, we'll stream your program in audio and video all over the world. Call Lola Jean now, 727-510-7622. Call today. Your network 1-hour program can start tomorrow. Broadcast your message in audio and video on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
The St. Petersburg Renaissance Fair opened all 4 weekends of April at England Brothers Park in Pinellas Park. Shop the artisans, enjoy the entertainment, eat a turkey leg while you watch the joust. There's games and rides for the kids, fun for the whole family at the St. Petersburg Renaissance Fair. Tickets available now at stpetersburgrenaissancefair.com.
Listen to the Tan Talk Radio Network for your chance to win tickets all month long. Do you have questions after being injured in a car accident or injured because of someone's negligence? Do you feel overwhelmed or uncertain about the next steps after being injured in a crash? The personal injury attorneys at Peronic, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes have been helping their injured clients since 1955 and are now on this radio station to provide guidance to you. Listen to FLA Law each Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Let their decades of experience help you and your family. Offices in Clearwater, non-attorney spokesman.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with the Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now, the voice of reason continues here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Here again is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
And with me in the Tan Talk studio are my co-hosts, attorney and former Circuit Judge Kevin Carey, and our voice of reason, senior political analyst Gary Gibbons. As John Lennon clearly understood, a world without religion would be a world of peace. Well, that makes for good music. It's not entirely true, because the major wars of the 20th century were really fought over differences of political and economic ambitions. But today, these seemingly endless conflicts in the Middle East are fueled entirely by religious differences. At least that's what I would argue. Because without the religion, they'd just be another collection of nations coexisting without conflict. Now, the irony is that while Crooked Donald and Vice President Vance criticized the Pope for advocating for peace, oddly enough, the fact is that the Christian religion is as oppressive as any other major religion and has caused as much war and suffering and both intellectual and physical oppression as any other. The Christian God himself personally ordered up a war in Numbers 31. I won't read it to you, but you can look it up for yourself. You won't believe what it says in there. And now this. Crooked Donald and many of his leading Christian supporters and top Republicans are taking part this week in a marathon reading of the Bible in an America 250 themed event billed as encouraging a, quote, return to the spiritual foundation that has shaped our country, unquote. The America Reads the Bible event, with each participant reading a passage aloud, is being live streamed this week from the Museum of the Bible in Washington and other locations. It's slated to feature a video of Crooked Donald on Tuesday evening reading a passage that called for national repentance in ancient Israel, words that have been used prominently for decades by those promoting the belief that America has been and should be a Christian nation. Now, critics say the event has a highly partisan list of participants and is part of a larger project to connect America's upcoming 250th birthday with a Christian nationalist vision that portrays the nation's founding as essentially Christian, which is something that historians dispute. It was a nation founded by a lot of people who claimed to be Christians, but the government that they established was totally and completely secular.
Yeah, for good reason, too. I mean, it was a historical reason for that.
They understood history, yes. Here's a statement commemorating the event from Donald Trump. He said, the Bible is, quote, indelibly woven into our national identity and way of life, unquote. Other high-ranking officials have been or will be reading biblical passages in person or by video. That includes cabinet officials like Defense Secretary Whiskey Pete, Secretary of State Little Marco, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and several other Republican members of Congress. This thing is really a charade because they don't have a moral or ethical hair among them. It's really complete stagecraft.
The thought of Trump reading from the Bible is just hilarious.
I wonder if he'll hold it upright this time.
Yeah, you might want to tell him that maybe he doesn't quite. Maybe he reads upside down. But what it is it's a tired playbook. He's a desperate man in a desperate administration. Let's bomb a country. Let's invoke the Bible. These are like the last potential cards that a desperate person plays, Ed.
I know it. I mean, it really means a lot coming from a man who swore on the Bible twice that he would, quote, "to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States," unquote, and has done exactly the opposite in both terms. This charade is just more Republican thoughts and prayers pretending to do something while actually doing nothing. What passage from the book of Tarantino will Hegseth be reading from this time? You wonder, don't you? I mean, I think that it's so easy to understand what the founders had in mind when we simply read the first words of the First Amendment, which says Congress will make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, I have heard that Clarence Thomas interprets that by saying, well, that means the federal government can't establish religion, but any state can become a theocracy. Not so, is it?
No.
Why? Because the Constitution applies to all Americans in all states. And he doesn't even understand that because he'd like to see this country be a theocracy.
Well, maybe he doesn't quite understand the separation concept of the separation of church and state.
Clearly doesn't.
And that there was, as you mentioned historically, Ed, back then there was, prosecution and for people who were not, the Church of England. And so this wasn't a minor issue. And as you said, it starts right out in the Constitution. But, the MAGA Republicans, and we talked last week about Florida, the free state. Freedom for these MAGA people is doing what we think you should do. There's nothing freedom about that. It's saying we want, and with the court's approval, and now these ridiculous emergency orders where you don't even go to this, this cowardice Congress or state legislatures and say, this is how we think you should live, and this is how we think you should think, including how we think you should think about your religion and God.
Yeah. Well, I think what really is interesting about the whole thing is that you mentioned that the founding fathers understood history. There's a reason that every government in Western Europe that had accepted Christianity in their foundation, it was a kingdom. And that's because it is the only form of government that Christianity advances. If we search for the words democracy, freedom, civil liberties, women's rights, republic, we don't find them anywhere in the Bible because they never conceived of these forms of government back when this religion came about. And so if we were a Christian nation, we'd be a kingdom, and the form of economics we would have embraced would probably be something very close to communism, because the message of Christianity is not that of a few people hoarding all the wealth while everybody else is poor. It's pretty much the opposite of trying to help the poorer people and distribute the wealth more evenly, which was, I think, the foundation of what Marx was trying to achieve. He was trying to break down this system of a few people and the royalty owning all the wealth of the country and nobody else being able to get a piece of it, even though they were working to create it in the first place.
And patriarchy is a big part of the Bible as well. The man has the control of the family, and women are supposed to, do whatever the man says and all that.
Well, you're absolutely right, Gary. There's a reason that women have been unable to vote for more than half of the lifespan of this country, and that goes back to the biblical position that women held, which was simply to be the homemaker, the bearer of the children, and the cook and the servant of the man. They couldn't enter professions. They couldn't, as I said, they couldn't vote. They couldn't get into higher education and so on. So, yeah, there were some Christian values that were incorporated when the country started, as we looked at earlier in the program in the Conservative Minute, including slavery and genocide and oppression of women. In fact, I think it's spelled out in the description of the government when the founders said all men are created equal. Notice they didn't say all people are created equal. And why? Because they were building this government for the white male landowners to run. And that's effectively how it was run until I think the first case that involved an individual civil liberties that came before the Supreme Court was in something like 1935. So the idea that somebody could sue the government for their liberties or their freedoms wasn't even a concept, even though it was written into the Constitution. And it wasn't until Johnson came along and signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act that we really started to use the Constitution to protect everybody, which goes back to the religious foundation of the country, which was discriminatory.
Well, speaking of religion, I do get a kick out of the fact that he's holding a Bible as Trump decided to take on the Pope. let me piss off every Catholic, in this country. And by the way, their MAGA supporters saying, well, we're entitled to do that because the Vatican is a city or I guess a country. But do you think anyone sits down with Trump and actually discusses, let's have a consistent, stable policy, whether you like it or not, at least make it consistent. But now let me pick a fight with the first American, I believe I'm Catholic, the first American Pope, who's very popular, by the way. So who else can I piss off? But the thought of him using this religion and holding a Bible when he doesn't even probably know where the closest church to the White House is just laughable.
Which is interesting. You mentioned Catholicism. See, now when a Pope is elected, all of the Catholics in the world do not get to cast a vote, right? He's elected by the Politburo. It's very much like what's going on in North Korea, Russia, or Cuba. That's the form of government that Christianity advances, and it's what the founders rejected when they said, wait a minute, it's time for the people to be able to govern themselves. Totally inconsistent with Christianity. So why are these guys trying to impose Christianity on us? I think it's, they're trying to appease the white nationalists. Also, there's no opportunity to amend any of the directives of religion in the way that we can amend the Constitution or the laws of our states or our cities, municipalities. There is no provision for that. The laws were written back 1,500 years ago, and they stay the same all the time, even though we ignore them. Essentially, we don't have a Sabbath day in which it's illegal to work, but according to Christianity, that's a capital crime. But we couldn't possibly shut our whole system down for a day.
Ed, you made the point a few minutes ago that it was despite this country now being 250 years old, that it was relatively recently into the latter part of the 20th century where you saw some change. And what we saw, at our age, you saw an evolution of thought. You had, that women should be voting, minorities should be voting. There's, these poll taxes, that requirement you own land. All of those were just a way to keep it from being all men are created equal, which does include women. But you had an evolution of thought, which my point is, Ed and Gary, that's now stopped. I don't see an evolution. I see us going backwards. I always felt like as I grew up and as a teenager and started noticing, reading the newspaper and noticing events, that there was this evolution of progress. That I would not say that today, that's the case.
No, the Department of Justice created the Civil Rights Division back in the 50s, before the Civil Rights Act was passed, because they realized that there were so many abuses happening in the southern states in particular, with violations of human rights that were happening here, that they needed to address it at the federal level. They were coming in and the feds were saying, the states, you're doing this all wrong, and we're going to have to protect these folks. And now what you're seeing is under this Department of Justice, they have completely disbanded pretty much the Civil Rights Division. And so they don't have any intention of protecting people's rights going forward. And that fits into what you're talking about, the church wants to resolve things that way, and they don't want the government involved, we can figure these things out on our own.
We're going to hear from Liz Oyer right after the break, expand on exactly what you just said.
Yeah, just quickly, to further your point, Gary, the result of that, and you're right, people can read about how this department, the Civil Rights Division, has been gutted. But from that, they've settled these cases for nothing, giving a free pass to these various entities that are violating the civil rights law. So they're not enforcing it. And they're settling cases, they're dismissing cases. It's corrupt. No other word applies but corrupt.
And now they're playing on the assassination of Charlie Kirk to pass laws that are advancing a specific religion. There's a new law in Kansas that will allow college students to sue their schools for free speech violations. And in Tennessee, a new law is going to encourage teachers and professors to include, quote, the positive impacts of religion, unquote, in American history courses. There's a Kirk-named law that was signed last week by Republican Tennessee Governor Bill Lee that extols the historical influence of Judeo-Christian values on the freedom and liberties ingrained in our culture. I once heard Sean Hannity say that he firmly believes that all of our democracy and the structure of our republic and our freedoms come to us from the Bible. But as we've just seen, biblical government is exactly the opposite. It's an oppressive kingdom. And that's what we had until the founders came up with this idea. Now, it is true they plagiarized a little bit from the Romans, right? The whole concept of a Senate really goes back to that and the democracy that the Greeks had, or the Grecians, as Bush used to call them, came up with. And so they weren't completely original in these concepts. They simply took these ideals to use to form a government that they believed the people were ready to be able to manage, and called it a republic, and used the democratic process to elect our representatives, which is completely opposite of what Christianity advocates.
Including tolerance.
Yeah, that's right.
Of other religions and viewpoints.
The amazing thing is that when we look at the Ten Commandments, we find that there isn't anything in our law or our government that really embraces any of these ideas. The first four of them are all about worshiping a single God and only one God, and the penalty for not doing it is death. It's a capital crime to subscribe to a different God. How does that relate to Congress will make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise? They were saying you can subscribe to any religion you want or reject them altogether. It has no bearing on your position as a citizen with respect to government. And what I see happening is that the government now is trying to use religion to impose their will of how they want to see our structures, our society structured, based on a white nationalist ideology, and saying that this is what the founders had in mind, and this is what Christianity is all about. Honor thy father and thy mother. There's no law that says you've got to do that, and yet if you don't do it, it's a capital crime in Christianity. He that curseth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. You can't kill. Well, we're killing people in Iran, right? We don't have, if we subscribe to that, we wouldn't even have a military, because as Hegseth pointed out to the generals, as he stood in front of these guys, he's not qualified to shine their shoes. And here he is talking to these guys as if he knows what he's talking about, telling them your job is to go and kill people and break things. That's not a Christian ideology, as I understand it. You can't commit adultery. You realize that's a capital crime? Obviously, our president doesn't subscribe to that. Leviticus says the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Now, maybe we should
Sounds like Melania.
We can get, You can't steal. You can't bear false witness. That's lying, essentially. Trump does it every time he opens his mouth, and you're not supposed to covet everything, which is all Trump does. I mean, that's the foundation of capitalism, is coveting what your neighbor, you want a car as good as he has.
Yeah, maybe we need to have a
money.
contest. Ed, is there any commandment that Trump has not violated out of the 10? Steal, I think he's certainly stolen.
He's done that. False witness. I don't know if he ever said anything disparaging about his old man or his mom, but that's about the only one I can think of.
So you may give him a pass. You may give him a pass on the honor of thy father and thy mother. One, okay.
I think that's why he wanted a second term, so he could violate the rest of the commandments.
It just could be.
Well, the Catholic Church, which in the past has been more conservative, the last two popes have been much more progressive. And they've been speaking out against this administration, which is, I think, what's gotten Trump all upset, is because the Catholic Church, which has generally been thought of as more of a conservative base for him, has pushed back to the credit of the last two popes.
Yeah.
And Pope Leo was called out Hegseth for praying, to Jesus for victory, and he said, that in religion, the only just war is one where you're fighting defensively, where you've been attacked by somebody else and not the other way around. And because we were the aggressor here, he doesn't feel that it's appropriate for, God doesn't reach out and tap you on the head and say, good boy, if you kill other people, because look at what the commandment said, right?
Right. I mean, and that hasn't happened since, what was it, like 1815, when the British got as far as Washington and burned the White House, I think, at the time. But since then, we haven't been invaded. Our Department of Defense has never needed to defend us. I suppose you could argue that Pearl Harbor was an invasion, but the fact is Japan had no designs on invading and occupying Hawaii or any part of the United States. They were simply trying to get the Seventh Fleet out of the way so they could keep expanding their interests in the Pacific Rim, right? And that was the only force that could stand up to them. So they thought, well, if we catch them napping, sink their carriers, they won't be able to rebuild in time for us to go ahead and secure all the real estate that we want. But beyond that, Vietnam was not a defensive posture on our part, is evidenced by the fact that we lost the war and the country remained intact. North Vietnam had no designs on this country. They simply wanted to unify their country after the French had gone in and mucked it all up with their colonialism.
And what we did, the South Vietnamese who were left there after that war ended, it was just criminal. We had given assurances of their safety, and they were left out to dry. Many of them were murdered after the helicopters were leaving after the end of that war. But yeah, that war wasn't even about communism. It was about what Vietnam wanted was an independence after French Indochina. There's a long history of that.
And there's a great article in the New Yorker that delves into those last days and when we were evacuating. And it starts out with when the first troops landed there, which was in April of 1965. The first American troops, the first Marines, landed on a beach about 10 miles north of Da Nang. And it was kind of like getting off the plane in Hawaii. The locals were standing there welcoming them with flowers and stuff. They didn't need to shoot at anybody. And then 10 years later, we're scrambling to get out, trying to save face. And it goes back into what Johnson was thinking about when he got us into that, which was he felt he had only two choices. One was to save face and stand up to communism, because if he didn't, then he thought, well, the whole world's going to look at us as basically impotent. We're just standing by, letting communism spread. So he was really faced with a very difficult decision that did bring down his presidency, in spite of all he did positive for the country, which I know you've pointed most of that out to me, but really making the strides in civil rights advances. And
I think he did more than Kennedy would have done. He used the power that he had after the assassination to, I think, accomplish goals that Kennedy would not have to. And I've always wondered why someone like Johnson, who's Robert Caro's written many books on him, who was such a wonderful politician, could not navigate that Vietnam issue better. Maybe it just shows how difficult that issue was.
Yeah. Yeah. And now do we have the prospect of ending up in the same kind of situation in Iran, because we're hearing that more and more troops are being positioned in the waters off the coast of Iran, as if we're going to go in there and invade them to either try to get all the materials that they're supposedly using for nuclear weapons and seize all of that. But from what we talked about earlier in the program about the Pentagon's own reports of what Iran still has available to them to fight back, it could be a very costly effort.
Well, Ed, Trump wants to get the hell out of Iran. He doesn't want to stay in Iran. He wants to get out.
Why is he sending more troops over there?
What's the famous saying? You're assuming rational thought. There was no deliberation or rational thought with that war or anything else that this administration does.
I think
it's posturing. That's what he's doing. He's just sending troops, saying, well, just like he's admitted now that his threat to annihilate the entire population of the country was just puffery. And that's the problem. When you lie all the time and nobody knows whether you ever tell the truth or not, it becomes problematic when you need to try to really negotiate with people and be honest with them. And you can't do that.
You both, I think, hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, big picture, you're strengthening the other superpowers. China has come in across the world and been helpful. You're strengthening Russia, who you're doing nothing really to help Ukraine. So Russia is going on. And so you're just weakening us as to the other two superpowers in this world.
And you're helping Iran. They've made out like bandits financially in this war.
And of course, we're alienating our own long-standing allies who
they're gone. Yeah.
They just won't ever trust us again to do anything.
But
I can't blame them.
They don't trust us, but they also don't fear us anymore because there's no stability there. And Taco Don, he makes threats that he backs off on. It's really a laughable situation. We don't have any respect in Europe or in any of the other democracies, let alone the Mideast.
Well, when Mark Carney said, in his speech a couple of months ago, that it's a new world and we have to look forward to, being more self-sufficient. And we're going to start doing that because we can't trust, the United States. And what they really did was they swallowed a few times when we would make mistakes, because they would say, well, their heart's in the right place and they really are trying to do good things around the world. And yeah, they're going to screw up from time to time. Now nobody believes that we're doing good things around the world because we aren't. We're abandoning our allies. We're abandoning any of the U.S. Aid that we did that was our form of soft power. We don't have Voice of America and all these things that, we were trying to spread democracy. Instead, we're trying to be more like, Hungary.
And that was supposedly to direct those resources toward America first and the American people. And now we're told, oh, no, we don't have those resources. We've got to spend them on bombs.
And when you say, and I agree with you, Ed, that this was primarily a distraction from Epstein, and so let's drop a bomb somewhere, you could not have picked a worse country on the map to bomb than Iran.
Yeah,
you're probably right.
It's almost bomb-proof because, it's got all these mountains around. It's really difficult to do any kind of invasion there, too. And that has all been war gamed out for decades. And that's why it never happened. It wasn't because he had the nerve to do it and nobody else did. He didn't have the brains to do it.
Well, back here in Florida, our Attorney General made an appearance at the Tiger Bay Club last week. And we are going to hear a firsthand account of that, what he had to talk about, some of the questions he answered and how he answered them. Of course, he is running for re-election, right?
Well, his first election. He's never was elected.
You're right. I said that wrong, and you're absolutely correct. correct. So we're going to take a quick time out, and we'll be back to talk about that and more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
Hey everyone, it is Brandy Joy with the Brandy Joy Joyride. Feel free to hop in and have a good time with us every Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. This show is brought to you by One Unit, dedicated to bringing people together, letting your voices be heard, and of course, we're here to entertain you, upbuild you, inspire you, and even hear from you. So every Thursday, tune in to 106.1 FM, Brandy Joy Joyride, and we will hear from you and let's have some fun.
You're listening to the voice of reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hey, it's Captain Jeff. Did you enjoy the interview with Ty Wood and the Jets last weekend and the weekend before? I know I certainly did. It was great to learn about the band, their Vegas residency, and the family unit that unites them in music. This weekend, we'll be focusing on Ty Wood, the man who has embraced his life through travel and music. You get a chance to hear what has brought him to this point, what is happening with his partnership with the Jets, and his future projects and endeavors. Join us this Saturday at 11 o'clock on Tan Talk.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
We're going to quickly check in with Poll Watch. A new poll shows Trump's approval rating has sunk to the lowest point of his second term, driven by Americans' concerns over rising costs and the Iran crisis. His energy secretary is a fellow named Chris Wright. He might not have helped win over any new fans for his boss after he said Sunday that gasoline prices likely will not fall below $3 a gallon until next year. What has fallen is Trump's popularity. Amid growing concerns about the economy associated with the war in Iran, the new NBC News Decision Desk poll found that 37% of adults approve of Trump's performance as president, while 63% disapprove, 50% of whom say they disapprove strongly. 2/3 of all Americans surveyed say the country's on the wrong track. Now, the national average of gasoline, the price of it hovers just above $4 a gallon. And in West Coast states like Washington and California, prices over $5 a gallon. Last year's national average at this time was $3.16. One other item, 46% of Americans believe the facts on vaccines are up for debate and that it's damaging to mandate shots. That's what RFK Jr. has been able to accomplish. 39% say the science is clear and that it's dangerous to question it. 49% of GOP voters say the return of vaccine-preventable diseases is a price worth paying for the ability to refuse shots.
And I think those numbers are actually being kind to him. The one last night from AP Nork, 33% approval, 23% approved cost of living issues. 32% on Iran. He's deep underwater on those. Immigration, his supposed highlight, 40% approval on immigration. So he is deep underwater on every issue that's currently before the public for an election year.
And the line is not a wavering line. It's a straight line angling consistently down. How low can you go?
Well, that's a very good question. I never thought I'd see a poll where 23% would approve of any policy from a president. I'm not sure there's ever been a poll where any policy has been at an approval rating of 23%.
Well, we've talked about gas prices and the fact that the president really has never had any control over gas prices. They're internationally, it's an international market that goes up and down depending upon those things. But what we have discovered that this president is uniquely qualified because he is the only person that's been able to personally affect the price of gas by this stupid decision to go to war in Iran. So congratulations. Those stickers on the pump that have the president. I saw one last year with Biden pointing at it, said, I did this. Now they're Trump pictures of him pointing at the price on the pump saying, I did this. And it's true.
This reminds me a lot of 1979 and 80 with Carter. And I think Trump needs to thank his lucky stars he's not up for re-election this year, and he will never be, with the grace of God, ever be in the White House again. But his minions, his cowards in the Congress will pay a heavy price, just like Jimmy Carter did in 1980.
Well, in Florida, the Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, stood before a bipartisan crowd Friday and faced a battery of critical questions about the Hope Florida scandal and his hefty university teaching salary. Joining us on the phone now, Gary Dolgen, occasional co-host here on The Voice of Reason. Gary, thanks for checking in. Important because you were there. You witnessed this firsthand. Am I right, sir?
Well, good morning. And yes, I did. And the Tiger Bay Club is a wonderful bipartisan group that grills elected officials when they come to speak to us. And he certainly was asked a lot of tough questions that he doesn't get all the time from the press.
Well, Gary, thank you again for calling in. I read that article and I said to myself, it was a very lengthy article in the paper the other day about it, and I thought of you, that you had to be there asking some of those tough questions.
Well, I'm a past president of the club, so I wasn't gonna miss Uthmeyer coming and getting a chance to grill him, and certainly he was grilled, but he deflected and he gaslighted. I had a personal interaction with him. Well, I asked him a question from the audience, and that was, he's been given a sweetheart gig to teach 2 part-time classes at the University of Florida Law School for $100,000. That's more than any adjunct professor gets anywhere in the state. So I asked him, you make $140,000 as Attorney General. It's a full-time job. Why not, as a public service, since you're a public servant, speak to these students and not charge the taxpayers any money? If you don't think $140,000 is enough of a salary for you, then lobby the legislature and the people for more. And if not, go to the private sector. And it took him back a little bit. He deflected. He basically said, "Oh, if I wasn't Attorney General, I would always want to teach." And I think I love interacting with the students, and the students really get a lot out of it. That was no answer, no offer to be a public servant to teach these students.
Gary, the 2 big issues that I took from this, one is that he was implicated, as we've talked about for months, on this Hope Florida scandal. And secondly, that he would basically, he said, I'm not going to enforce certain laws because I don't think they're constitutional. I guess he all of a sudden decided he was now a Supreme Court justice, and he could on his own make rulings about what laws should be held in place or not held in place.
Well, that's right. One of the first question he was asked was, he was involved as DeSantis' chief of staff in suspending Andrew Warren, the Hillsborough state attorney, for allegedly, not enforcing laws, which a federal judge found not to be true. But then he has announced publicly that he would not enforce various laws. So when he was asked about that, he said, "Oh, well, those are Warren's policy preferences. With me, I'm not enforcing laws that are unconstitutional." So after the event was over, I went up to him personally and I said, "Mr. Attorney General, I left a personal note with you when I was in Tallahassee, and you didn't respond. So I'm glad I have this chance." And I said, "You said you're not enforcing the law that the legislature passed, banning the sale of guns or shotguns and rifles to those under 21. My daughter this was passed after the Parkland massacre in 2018. My daughter had 3 of her friends murdered at Parkland, and I told him that. And my daughter was literally texting with one of her friends who was hiding from the gunman when this was happening. First of all, no empathy from him. Sorry for the trauma for your daughter, and sorry for the loss of her friends. But he starts to tell me, well, there's a split in the circuit courts, and I believe that law to be unconstitutional, so that's why I'm not enforcing it. I said, with all due respect, your view is not what counts on constitutionality. It's the courts that count. So he walked away from me very rudely at that point, not showing any empathy at all, for the tragedy that happened back in 2018 to all of these young students and their friends at Parkland.
Well, he has shown arrogance along the way. He's never been elected. As he was, as we know, the governor appointed his. He did a good enough job with the Hope of Florida, all of that controversy and whatnot. But I don't know if there's really a chance that he might draw strong opposition. I can't even tell you who the Democratic opponent is.
He does have a Democratic opponent who's a former state senator. There was a poll recently that shows it being close, and people just need to go out and vote. And maybe perhaps with the anger against Trump, you're going to have a lot of Democrats and independents voting for a Democratic ticket. I'll tell you the thing that seemed to anger the crowd the most about one of his responses. There was a question about transgender, and how he, goes out of his way to make life so difficult for these kids. So he starts to talk about his 6-year-old daughter being a tomboy who likes to play soccer. And he says, I sure am lucky she's in private school, because if she was in public school, then, there'd be teachers who might be encouraging her to be a boy. And people, that just evoked a really strong reaction. My kids all went to public schools. I went to public schools. I don't remember teachers encouraging girls to be boys or boys to be girls. It's just so outrageous that when that came out of his mouth.
You're right, and also just the arrogance of saying, "I don't need to follow the law." I mean, as a former judge, if he came in, he's nothing more than a party. I know he's the head law enforcement officer of the state of Florida, but he's a party to litigation. If he comes into any judge and says, "Well, Judge, I don't like that law, and I'm not going to follow it,"
Kevin,
go ahead.
Kevin, as a matter of fact, he did. He was held in contempt of court by a federal judge. He's appealing that right now. So here's someone that is the chief law enforcement officer of this state, and our taxpayer, we're paying him $140,000 a year, plus the University of Florida is giving him another $100,000. One of the things I would have asked him if the conversation continued, did you tell your law students that it's okay to disobey a federal court order and be held in contempt? That's the arrogance of this guy. We've had some pretty bad attorney generals, Pam Bondi and Ashley Moody, the last two. I don't think they were held in contempt of court by a federal judge, at least. That's a pretty low bar. But this guy has.
Well, Pam will be soon. So
that may be, but not. This guy beat her to it.
Well,
Gary,
I was just pleased to, and quickly, and I'll give the floor to Gary. I was just pleased to see that there was an audience that he had to face. I think these people all live in silos, thinking there's no one out there who is bothered by their behavior. So I hope at least it was somewhat sobering for him to realize that there were people out there that were not happy with what he was doing.
I'm glad that he had that opportunity. He certainly walked away from me at the end. There was, we're a bipartisan club, so there were certainly some of his fans were in the audience, and so he also got some softball questions. But there were a lot of tough questions asked of him, especially the Hope Florida question, and he basically, deflected on that and said nothing. Nothing. It's a nothing burger here. Nobody did anything wrong, and of course, it's just outrageous. Millions of dollars of government money was transferred to a political campaign against the marijuana, making marijuana legal on the 2024 ballot. And of course, he sits up there and says, "Well, it's harmful, so it was good for a good purpose." And so the end justifies the means. That's my thinking of how he's thinking about it. And he needs to be held accountable. So far, he hasn't been held accountable by a grand jury that's been investigating it in Tallahassee. So it's up to the voters to hold him accountable.
Yeah, Gary, my question was going to be on because Tiger Bay is bipartisan. Were there any Republicans who asked any kind of question that wasn't a softball question that tried to actually, indicate that they didn't think what he was doing was right either?
My sense is that the majority of Republican questions were softball, but I did speak to someone at the end of the meeting who was a Republican, and he was unhappy with him as well. So not every Republican there was forum and softball questions. We still have a few who want honest leaders and are not happy with the direction that Uthmeyer and DeSantis have taken this state. And so we've got an opportunity in November. We've got David Jolly running for governor as a Democrat who's been on this show before, who's doing well. Got a Democratic Attorney General candidate, and we've got American hero Alex Vindman challenging Ashley Moody for the Senate seat. And Democrats just need to get out there and vote this November and change in Florida, which is what we need.
And independence, even more important.
That's right. It is independents are going to be necessary because there's more registered Republicans than Democrats now. Independents have been voting vast majorities against Trump because they're upset with him, and even some moderate Republicans who are unhappy with the dishonesty. I mean, you can share some political views with someone, but if they are a dishonest person, we don't want any of our elected leaders being dishonest or breaking the rules. It should be that way on both sides, and that's what I've always wondered when there's this dishonesty out there, why some people still vote for dishonest leaders.
Well, I think there's no question there's going to be a blue wave in November. And if Uthmeyer thinks he may not get caught up in this blue wave, I can assure him that the Virginia Attorney General got elected with much, much more baggage than Uthmeyer. The Uthmeyer's got baggage. So he certainly, both he and also Ashley Moody can certainly, as well as in the governor's race, all be subject to the blue wave in this state that others have thought is solely a red state now. That may not be the case this year.
Well, you've got to get people out there to vote. In 2018, there was a blue wave after Trump's first two terms, but the blue wave, unfortunately, did not materialize in Florida. They were extremely close elections. DeSantis won by only a half a percentage point. There was a recount. Rick Scott, probably around the same margin. I think there was a recount there. Nikki Fried, the Democratic candidate for agricultural commissioner, was able to get in. But so Democrats need to work really hard to get independents and moderate Republicans to the polls this year. I have a feeling this will be a stronger blue wave than 2018 because we're in a worse situation than even 2018 because now we've had one term of Trump plus another 2 years. Maybe people will finally learn their lesson with regard to Trump. I still scratch my head how people gave him another chance in 2024 after what they saw of him on January 6th.
Well, do you think that it may have to do with who he was running against, and that a lot of Americans, independents and white nationalists, just can't come to grips with the idea of the country being run by a woman of color who comes across as a giggling bimbo sometimes, like the Sarah Palin. Which is to say that if Biden had stepped down earlier in time to give us time to have a primary, that she clearly would not have been the candidate, I believe, and we would have had a strong candidate who would have won handily.
I don't know about that. First of all, to describe Kamala Harris to have bimbo anywhere now near her would be wrong, respectfully. She's one of the most accomplished people, having served as Attorney General of California, a senator from California. And the election was not a runaway. It was a very close election that with a few votes the other way in the states could have been a different result. I'm not convinced that I think she still may have been the nominee because African-American women are a large constituency in the Democratic Party. I think what the situation was is that people were upset with high gas prices. inflation, etc., which of course a lot of it was created by Trump and COVID, and so they were unhappy. And now we've got this. They thought Trump was going to reverse things. He hasn't, and so now they're unhappy with him.
Well, let me give you the number here, Gary, and you're right. The exit polls show that 30% of the voters in November 2024 said the cost of living inflation issue was the most important issue on that ballot. Of that 30%, 80% of those voters voted for Trump. That number now, the poll, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to our show earlier, Gary, the latest poll last night, this AP NORC poll, has a 23% approval rating on cost of living issues currently. So that's why Harris lost. I tend to agree with you. I'm not sure that anyone would have won that race, although I do agree, Ed, that I think Biden should have stepped down, as he promised to do after one term.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that the issue that got Trump elected, he's deeper underwater. Again, 23% is the number. This data is clear, and the data is clear that was the main issue in November, the cost of living inflation. It certainly wasn't let's go to war with Iran. No one was talking much about that.
Yeah.
Well, he promised against that. The economy is always typically the number one issue. But I'm just surprised when someone's indicted on numerous charges, and especially after what happened on January 6th, I just find that I still scratch my head. Now, you may be right. If another Democrat completely outside of the administration managed to get the nomination, then maybe things could have been different. The question is another Democrat getting the nomination. The power of incumbency of a president and a vice president is very high. And typically, if a vice president wants the nomination, they're going to get it. They just have a tough time winning, i.e. J.D. Vance will probably be the Republican nominee. But if history follows itself in 2028, hopefully he will lose.
But I still go back to perception and the importance of that, because you're right about Harris. She does have excellent credentials, and I'm not suggesting she isn't capable of doing it, but what is the perception of the voters in the same way that they perceived Trump being qualified to run the country because he was thought to be a brilliant, accomplished businessman? Forget the fact that every business he ever started failed. He was still thought to be a businessman who could come in and balance the budget and straighten everything out that these politicians are hopelessly incapable of doing. And now we're finding out that, no, he's making things worse.
Well, that perception was there the first time he was elected. And you know what? I used to watch that show, The Apprentice, and I was pretty impressed with that. I was not an anti-Trump person before I started, watching him campaign for president. That show was entertaining to me, and I thought he was a successful businessman. But after one term, he left us with look at all these people that died from COVID, which he mismanaged, and look what happened to the economy in January 6th. After all that mismanagement, you can understand why people could have made a mistake electing him one time, but how could they elect him again? And then the coward Republicans who were running against him, who wouldn't come down on him for being indicted or for how he mismanaged COVID, why were they even running against him in the first place? Then they should have just said, okay, you're our nominee. So I just don't get how people forgot how terrible things were at the end of his first term.
And remarkable to me that he wouldn't even debate the Republican candidates, probably because he didn't want to be in a position of being forced to account for his incompetence. And
he can't defend his record, or what he does is he lies. And most of the time, the press does not call him out for that. And sometimes I think it's because if they ask him a tough question, they're scared that the White House staff will take away their press privileges.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming on board.
Yeah.
Very welcome.
You're a friend of the show. We love to have you on, and thank you for taking the time to call in.
And thanks for
Nice talking with you
speaking
guys.
truth to power too. I love it.
Yes, that's what we need to do. All right.
Thank you so
we'll
much.
See you guys later. Thanks. Bye.
See you, Gary.
Bye-bye. Well, we've got about, a minute and a half left. So if you want to follow up with anything or comment on anything he said.
Well, I would just say, Ed, I think, we can't change what's happening in 2024, but I think in 2026, you do see a serious problem for these Republicans. I think the only way they can get out, as you've mentioned this many times, is toward the suppression, intimidation, trying to narrow and limit the vote. Because if all the people who wanted to vote, it's going to be a tsunami in favor of the Democrats.
And then they're going to need to deliver.
Yeah. Well, if we really want to make America great again, then we need to stop treating it like it's a football game or politics and winners and losers, and start doing things for the common good. And we haven't done that in a long time.
And of course, one of the first things they'll do is start holding all these incompetent cabinet members accountable for what they're doing and how they're misappropriating their positions for personal advantage.
And people need to go to jail for what they've done, and that's the only message that's going to resonate going forward, is if there's real accountability. Just turning the page and saying, oh, no, we got to look forward and not back is going to be a mistake because of how corrupt things are now. It's very corrupt.
More and transparently corrupt.
Oh, yeah.
They don't even try to hide it. Trump comes right out and says, well, I'm stealing all this money because nobody cares. Well, the Republicans won't hold him accountable, but the Democrats will if they get in. It's time for our quote of the day. It's from Frederick Douglass. He said this: liberty is meaningless where the right to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist. Join us again next Thursday morning. We'll be here at 9 o'clock with another edition of The Voice of Reason. I want to thank my co-hosts, Kevin Carey, Gary Gibbons, and Gary Dolgen, who checked in with us by phone. I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the statement seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because a conservative said it.
Make them prove it.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
Steve Kathan. President Trump says on social media he's ordered the Navy to go after boats laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and he indicates a U.S. mine clearing operation is underway. CBS's Ramy Inocencio.
In terms of the situation in the Strait, it is still tense. Iran's Revolutionary Guards released video amping up that tension overnight. 2 cargo ships that were seized. Today, senior Iranian government officials also pointing the finger at the White House for this freeze in talks. We don't know where those are going.
A ceasefire has eased the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, and today CBS's Nancy Cordes tells us Israeli and Lebanese officials are meeting at the State Department.
What both sides want is pretty clear. The Israelis say they want the dismantlement of Hezbollah so that it can no longer threaten the Israeli people. The Lebanese want Israel to give up its claim to this new sort of buffer zone that the Israelis have seized in the southern Lebanon.
A cannabis industry group praises President Trump's reclassification today of state-licensed medical marijuana as a less dangerous drug. Legal analyst Lori Levinson.
This change from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 is one that people have been pushing for a while. It recognizes that there can be potential medical use of marijuana.
Warner Brothers shareholders have approved the proposed $81 billion sale to Paramount Skydance in a mega merger that could reshape Hollywood. Paramount is the parent company of CBS News. Correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns is on Capitol Hill, where in a late-night vote, the Senate approved a budget plan for the Department of Homeland Security and sent it to the House.
The too long didn't read of all of this is that nothing has passed. We're not really any step closer to refunding DHS. So people are still waiting for their paychecks. And paychecks for TSA officers that were funded by the executive branch, those are set to run out by Friday.
A Virginia judge has blocked the new congressional map voters approved this week. CBS's Michael Wallace.
Tazewell County Circuit Court Judge Jack Hurley ruled the referendum to create the new map, which would likely give Democrats 4 more House seats, violated the state constitution. He says it skirted a 90-day public notice requirement, and he called the question that was presented to voters flagrantly misleading. Virginia's Democratic Attorney General Jay Jones plans to appeal, saying an activist judge should not have veto power over the people's vote. The Republican National Committee calls Hurley's ruling a major victory for Virginians.
And checking Wall Street, right now the Dow is up 7 points. The S&P is up 4. The NASDAQ is trading lower. This is CBS News.
The stars shine brighter on CBS Morning. This is a slam dunk.
So cute.
Gail came in singing for me today.
On CBS Mornings.
I'm Piera Palazzolo, VP of Digital Marketing for the...
This is Downtown Dave. How would you like to be able to promote yourself, your business, or someone else's business for less than the cost of one 60-second commercial on many Tampa Bay radio stations? Here's the deal. You can have your own 1-hour radio program on the Tan Talk Network for less than the cost of one 60-second announcement on many Tampa Bay stations. Your program will be on 2 Tampa Bay radio stations and will cover 4 million people in Florida, plus worldwide on the internet in both audio and video. And you'll have a web link for your business on the Tan Talk 1340 website. We provide the producer, the state-of-the-art equipment, free production of commercials, and much more. Check it out today. Call Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at 727-510-7622. That's 510-7622. Call Lola O'Brien now, 727-510-7622. Call now, and your 1-hour radio program can start tomorrow. Call 510-7622 for Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hey, Kenny here with the Brian Cash Claus Coupon Book. Tune in every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network to hear the BCC Coupon Book radio show. We feature local small business owners with great deals from restaurants to services in our area. And if you're interested in creating excitement through branding your business locally, give us a call here at the Brian Cash Claus Coupon Book, 727-804-6082. We'll see you right here at 3 o'clock on Wednesdays.
Hey, you new to the area or just want to know about the best hidden gems and upcoming events? Stay tuned. Be Local Buzz with Devin takes you to these places, introduces you to the best businesses, and tells you about upcoming buzz. Preset your radio to Tan Talk 1340 AM or 106.1 FM. That is the Be Local Buzz with Devin on Tan Talk 1340 AM and 106 FM. Looking forward to speaking with you.
It's the Be Local Buzz with Devin, Tuesdays from 4 to 5 p.m.
Hi, this is Paul Malloy, host of Freedom Works, The Paul Malloy Show. I hope you'll join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, here on the Tan Talk Radio Network, where we strive to bring you the libertarian perspective on political events of the day. There's no show quite like Freedom Works, with in-depth interviews, our ultimate top 10 list, and so much more. So join us for Freedom Works, The Paul Malloy Show, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hey, it's Captain Jeff. Did you enjoy the interview with Ty Wood and the Jets last weekend and the weekend before? I know I certainly did. It was great to learn about the band, their Vegas residency, and the family unit that unites them in music. This weekend, we'll be focusing on Ty Wood, the man who has embraced his life through travel and music. You get a chance to hear what has brought him to this point, what is happening with his partnership with the Jets, and his future projects and endeavors. Join us this Saturday at 11 o'clock on Tan Talk.
Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And we have a great story today because my guest is somebody really special. He spent 5 decades, some of the most fascinating years in history, and he is a retired U.S. Navy captain and former intelligence professional. Which means he's really smart, and he's a little bit sneaky. and I am so happy to welcome you, Ralph DeFalco, to Joy on Paper.
Thank you so much, Patsy, for having me on your show and giving me a chance to chat with you.
This is going to be fun. We're talking about a wonderful book, Counterfeit, and it's your first book. This is a debut.
This is my first novel. I wrote nonfiction for many years, but this is my first attempt of tipping my toe in the water and writing fiction.
Like any Navy man, when you tip your toe, you know what you're doing. And really, this is good. This is so good. And I enjoy it so much. But I just want to mention, this is so funny, when I heard or read that you have a Cadillac. So
Me too. I have a 1976 Cadillac Eldorado convertible,
What color?
red, Firethorn red,
That
with a
would be
white.
my second choice for a Cadillac, but I had a white Cadillac, 73 vintage.
Oh, okay. All right.
Beautiful, beautiful cars. There's nothing like those cars. They don't make those cars anymore.
You're absolutely right, Patsy. They do not make them like they used to.
But you'll have to know where I had mine. I
Where-
had it sent over from the States. I was living in Europe, and I had it sent over by ship, got it from Bremen, and drove it all the way to Iran.
Holy smokes. What a trip.
What a trip. And a great part of it was doing the Appian Way all the way through Italy and all the way down to Brindisi.
Oh, that's a fabulous ride. You must have had a great deal of fun.
Oh, absolutely. Let's just say I got noticed.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
Well, it was useful for my business. It promoted at the time I had a business in Europe, and it was fun.
Good for you.
Yeah. So
Trip of a
Cadillac-
lifetime.
But and it's so interesting. This book is timely. People are interested more in the Navy than they've ever been. We are seeing things that I don't know if even you expected to see such action in the Navy.
It's certainly surprising to see the level of involvement with the surface fleet, and especially in the blockade right now, the blockade of Iran. But previous to that, we saw a masterful display of really integrated joint operations. The combination of American power projected from the decks of our carriers, the overflights by the Air Force, and certainly the remarkable achievements of the pararescue in bringing two of our aviators home. It's truly been, the last month has been remarkable.
Well, it has been. I have been watching it and looking at it. I've been so amazed by it because it was bad enough that the Ukraine war came and the ground war. I can't even handle the ground war anymore. Yeah, it's just too much for me. But the naval war in May, it's going to be the 84th anniversary of Coral Sea. And I've got several guests coming on to talk about that. And
I'm going to be tuning in for that for certain. I'm a great student of the Pacific War. And in fact, many of the elements of the Pacific War factored into some of my thinking when I wrote The Counterfeit.
Yes, that's why I realized that as I'm reading it, I'm saying, okay, he knows about the Coral Sea and all the other battles there. And so that brings us to your book. What do you like to tell people first? And then I have some questions.
I think what I'd like people to know is that The Counterfeit is in many ways an outgrowth of my years of experience, not only as a historian, but as a naval intelligence officer. The novel combines elements from history with some of what I would call forward-looking and taking today's trends, today's events, and projecting them out into the future. And it's a disturbing, in many ways, future for the United States. And it is not at all outside the realm of possibility.
Making it very, I think they're describing it as dystopian, but sometimes of the future dystopian, but sometimes you feel like we are living in a dystopian world.
Oh, in many ways, people have talked about it as both dystopian, and they've also talked about The Counterfeit as predictive, which I found quite unusual when I first heard someone say that. And the predictability is based on plausibility. These are events that could actually transpire given current trends and current conditions in the United States, especially the tremendous ideological divide we have and how fraught our peril is given the nature of American adversaries.
But do you feel better now that you've seen the American really kicking in there and doing amazing work?
It's always refreshing to see the joint effort. I spent most of my naval career not merely as a naval officer, but as part of joint commands. And being part of joint commands makes you realize and appreciate the depth of really the kind of conventional power, the conventional warfighting ability that the United States can bring to the fore. So it took quite a bit of energy, intellectual energy, for me to predict a future where the United States has actually lost a naval war in the Pacific to China, and then spin out from that what would be the results back in homeland USA.
And so it's interesting that for Homeland USA, you picked Chicago as the location for much of the action. So
Yeah,
what is that?
I'll tell you, the novel begins with paroled military officers as part of the armistice that ends the Pacific War. The military officers, American military officers, are paroled. And this is nothing unusual. We've seen this happen before in history. We saw it, of course, after the American Civil War. We had American officers paroled for the first time. But in the United States, in my novel, these paroled officers are sent back basically to where they lived before the war. And in my protagonist, Philip Nolan's case, it's his home of record. It's where he grew up in the Chicago area. And my wife and I spent about 40 years living in the Chicagoland area. So I'm familiar with that scenario. And as you read the book, you'll also remember that my character, Philip Nolan, the protagonist of The Counterfeit, is a Chicago Cubs baseball fan.
Because if I had written it, he would have been in Detroit because I'm a Tigers fan. So
there you go.
There you go.
It's all about local allegiances, but creating one of the things I found out in writing this novel, quite different from having written nonfiction for many years, is that you have to create characters, as you well know, out of whole cloth. You have to create their personalities, what they look like, how they speak, how they interact with others. And the real challenge is to try to make these characters authentic. So when I was thinking about making an authentic character, I asked myself, what kind of interests and enthusiasms would this man have besides his career in the Navy? And it dawned on me, he's got to be a sports fan if he's from Chicago.
So that works out. Well, in general, the characters you create, I thought that was one of the best lines when you introduce a shadowy figure. So how do we want to describe it? But that opening line, the first thing she says, it will stick with people.
Oh yes, the scene where Nolan makes his first meeting with one of his recruiters.
Yeah,
it's quite the scene. He's just been to the accountability center. All paroled officers are required to report their whereabouts in person in the future. And he comes out of that meeting, that appointment in the accountability center, and only to find that he's being followed. And I believe the line you're referring to is where she says, "Am I too ugly to rape?"
Yes. Yes, people will sit back with that one. And it's funny, a line like that people will remember too. So it was good. It was a good introduction to the character.
Thank you. Yeah, that was another fun character to write. And as Annie eventually is revealed in the novel as not quite who she appears to be. She is another one of those characters in the novel who is a counterfeit.
Yes.
So we use the counterfeit really throughout the novel to describe not only a United States that is a facsimile of what it once was, but Nolan himself is a counterfeit. He's imitating his brother, taking the place of his brother. Annie, another character in the novel, is certainly a counterfeit. We see Emily, who has been planted in the Department of Homeland Security. She's really not what she seems either. So the theme of counterfeiting runs through the novel, and it extends even to counterfeit money as well.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's sometimes there were parts I said, oh, he's taking this straight out of the headlines, because we hear here they find somebody in one of the agencies who is a spy. They've got them already. So we're like, we're in this between world of, yes, it could be as bad as you predict. We hope not, but it's still not so good.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the strong points of the novel of the counterfeit is that you take plausible scenarios and you build on those plausible scenarios. The arc of the novel employs a very unique plot device, and that plot device is drawn from my experience as an intelligence officer. In the intelligence community, among analysts, we have a phenomenon known as creeping normalcy. A series of small changes occurring over time eventually result in a significant and threatening change to the landscape. And in the counterfeit, I introduce bit by bit to the reader some of those incremental changes that I thought if we had laid them all out on the front end, if we built a huge backstory on the front end, it wouldn't have been as plausible, it wouldn't have been as believable, and it probably would not have been as frightening, I think, as using this device of creeping normalism. The little tiny incremental changes, and the readers dragged along by those changes. So that was one of the fun parts of writing the novel, using that device.
Recently, one of my guests was Jung Chang. She wrote Mao. And in that book, she talks about this kind of planning, long-term planning slowly. First, Mao got into power with slow planning from step to step. And then it is something that they utilize today. It's the same idea of little bit by little bit.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. China is engaged in a very purposeful, long-term plan, incremental plan to do several things: to stabilize the U.S. economy, to undermine our infrastructure, and to basically create divisions in American society. And what's in the counterfeit is the outcome of all of those efforts projected out into the future. The counterfeit is a story about the United States run after having been defeated in the Pacific.